And again, as I mentioned, our theme is honoring our relatives today. Next slide, please. Bonnie Claremont was going to facilitate today's webinar and unfortunately is not able to join us. And so we send our thoughts with Bonnie today. And I would like to turn it over to my co-presenter, Lana, to introduce herself.
Hamataki apie, Lana Hunter Maki apie, Sasituan Wakbetawan Imataha, Gurate YukatuKsach Ies Nahatuti. My name is Lana Hunter, and I represent the Sasituan or Sisseton Wahpeton Oyate Nation in Sisseton, South Dakota. And my father's people are from the Tlingit Nation here in Southeast Alaska. I'm honored to be joining you today. And before we get started, I just want us to send our good thoughts, prayers, good energy to Bonnie Claremont, to Hokie Claremont, and to Jim Claremont this morning as we begin our webinar. And I know I have big shoes to fill, so I hope I can do all of these organizations the justice that they deserve and the wonderful work that they're doing here in Indian country. And I'm honored to be joined by Chia, my colleague. Thank you and welcome.
So as we mentioned earlier, our theme today is honoring our relatives, and the board and staff came up with our theme for our 25th anniversary, celebrating our journey, honoring our relatives, and building a vision for the future. So we're grateful that you all can join us and celebrate with us as we move forward in our journey. Next slide, please. And we just wanted to make a note that no federal funds were used for this webinar. And I'm going to turn it over to Lana to introduce our honor song today.
Oh, thank you, Chia. So we have all of our traditional way of life and understanding of who we are as Native people, as Indigenous people, come from our heartbeat and understanding that we are all connected, Matakiwasan. And so in that way, we honor all of our relatives and understand that we are all connected in a good way. And so with that, we wanted to begin today's webinar by honoring our relatives who are with us today. All of the organizations that we are honoring today, we're honored to have each and every one of them join us, and to also welcome each one of you who have joined us on this webinar to celebrate our 25th anniversary and celebrating our journey, honoring our relatives, and building a vision for the future. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Abby Chavez, to open us up with the boys. And for many of the folks joining us on the call today, many of you know Lakota or Hokie Claremont from the boys. He has been gracious enough to share with us an honor song for each and every one of you this morning, but also in honoring each one of our honorees who are on the phone today. Thank you. Thank you, Abby, for having that queued up for us. And we keep the Claremont family in our hearts and prayers this morning as we get started in honoring our amazing organizations doing work around Indian country. We are honoring today the Emmonak Women's Shelter, the Gabrielino Tongva Springs Foundation, the Pine Ridge Girls School, Pojoaque, Pojoaque Healing to Wellness Court, and the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. And we are proud and honored to be working with each one of these organizations from around the nation that promote healing and build visions and hope for our Native women, children, and honor our ancestors and our relatives. So today we are going to, as an overview, look at all of the organizations and have each one of their representatives speak on behalf of their organizations. We are so honored today to be joined by each one of the representatives, and we will hear and understand from the representatives what the work that they're doing in Indian country to honor Native women and children. And I am going to introduce my relative from the Emmonak Women's Shelter in Emmonak. We have with us this morning Joanne Horns. She is the executive director. And as you can see in the chat box, each one of the organizations Ashley is putting in the chat box. So please feel free to click on those organizations at your leisure. But for now, I would like to introduce Joanne Horns, who has done work with us over the years and more recently worked with us on our strengthening tribal responses to end violence against Native women, was the work that we were able to do with her organization in Emmonak. And they're one of the oldest organizations that has provided culturally specific services to Native women and children. And they're located in Emmonak, Alaska, and they primarily serve the Yupik community. However, they have not turned anyone away. So Joanne, we would like to introduce your organization, and if you would like to share with us what Emmonak does, all of the beautiful things that you are able to do for your community and for the Yupik women and children. Joanne?
Hi, my name is Joanne Horns. I'm the executive director for the Emmonak Women's Shelter here in Alaska. I started as a relief advocate since I started working late 1980s. I'm originally from Lady Village of Kotlik, Alaska. I relocated here to Emmonak late 1970s, and Emmonak is my home now. I started off as a relief advocate. Like I said, I'm a survivor of domestic violence. I went in and out of the shelter for many years. Pretty soon I had 4 children behind me, but I put a stop to that myself, and I worked my way up as a executive director since I started working, being a relief advocate for women and children for domestic violence and sexual abuse. I work as a program coordinator, rural outreach coordinator, and now I'm the executive director for the Emmonak Women's Shelter. I continue to work in this line of work to help women that have gone through abuse in our region. I remember I started going to the shelter when it was in an old building back in 1979 when it was first established. It was an old building that was donated to how many villages, how many women that were looking for a place for women and children to go to, because Emmonak was damp and people were able to bring in alcohol from who knows where, but a lot of women and children were in need of place to go. That's how the women here gathered to find a place for women and children to go to. And I was one of the victims. I started going into shelter, in and out of shelter. Pretty soon I decided to help women and children work, help them with the violence that they go through. And we service now today. I remember when I started as a relief advocate, I was, there was only 5 villages we serviced. We serviced only 5 villages. And throughout the year, when we started getting federal funding, the Emmonak Women's Shelter serviced 13 villages in our service area. And we fly women from all 13 villages that we service in our service area. And it wasn't easy because during the winter, it wasn't easy because of the freezing fog or stormy weathers we have. And then we have to fly them to here, the shelter, to the women's shelter. And sometimes we make referrals because sometimes the women's shelter here gets full. We have a 3-bedroom shelter and 9 beds. Now we have rollaways and we have cots and we have advocates working here. We have 3 advocates working, the 8 to 4 shift, the 4 to midnight, and the midnight shift. And if any of the full-time can't make it, we have backups. We have relief advocates working on.
Joanne, I'm not sure if you dropped off. It's we lost connection with you. We can't hear you right now. Sorry, everyone. So Joanne is in Alaska, and sometimes the bandwidth isn't too great in rural Alaska. Oh, Lana, I don't think we can hear you either.
Thank you, Chia. I think as we wait for Joanne to join us, one of the most powerful responses for our tribal communities and for our Native women and children who've experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, and as we've seen recently in Alaska, sex trafficking. One of the most powerful responses we can have is our cultural support, our cultural shelters, and Emmonak is one of 2 shelters in Alaska that serves Native women and children. And so we're honored to have them here. And as you heard, within our smaller villages, many folks don't understand the, I guess, mileage, if you will, around the support and service area. But Emmonak serves about 6,000 square miles within their service area. That includes about 3,000, population of about 3,000. So if you think of, you know, just a large, vast service area and the response that it takes to service all of those 6,000 miles, it is key and critical to have the local community, but also to have our native languages. One of the most challenging difficulties that folks may not understand in rural Alaska is that many of our elders, our communities, still speak in our indigenous languages. So we often see, you know, that we have our responses, our services, our crisis phones, our brochures, everything in our native languages, as well as our native foods. And so it's very powerful to have Emmonak servicing that large population, but also to understand what it means to be isolated in those smaller communities, and to rise to the challenges of oftentimes maybe travel, leaving a location, but also responding with their hearts in their indigenous languages, I think is a very powerful spiritual response to being a good relative. And that's what we think of advocacy, domestic violence, sexual assault advocacy, as being a good relative. And so we want to thank the Emmonak Women's Shelter. We want to honor the Emmonak Women's Shelter. And we most importantly want to highlight all of the important work that they do in Alaska and for the victims that they serve, as you heard, since 1979. So thank you to Joanne. And as Chia mentioned, it is oftentimes broadband. You know, we have these wonderful ideas that we're going to do Zoom calls and things like that, but oftentimes not just in Alaska, but Indian country, we have to think of those challenges as well. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Chia, to introduce our next honoree.
Thank you, Lana. Next, we're going to hear from Bob Ramirez, the Executive Director of the Gabrielino Tongva Springs Foundation. And so with that, I'd like to invite Bob to turn on his camera and join us. Thank you, Bob. Bob, I think you're still on mute there. We can see you, but can't hear you.
Mute. There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello.
Loud and clear.
Okay.
Thank
I don't
you.
see myself, but I see Chief Anthony Morales with the Gabrielino Band of Mission Indians dancing at the Springs many years ago. In 1769, a Spanish expedition set off from San Diego to rediscover the Monterey Bay up the coast of California. And they passed through what is now known as Los Angeles County. There they encountered several villages. One of the villages is known as Kuruvungna, which means place where we are in the sun. And they spent the night there. They reported meeting very friendly Gentiles, or heathens they called them. They were non-Christian, but they were friendly and welcoming and honored them and welcomed them with food and water. And they spent the night there, and they eventually made it headed north through the Sepulveda Pass to later be the first Europeans to see the San Francisco Bay. They were on their way north because the Russians were coming down from Alaska, and the Spanish needed to press their claim on what was then known as Alta California. When they came back through the areas now known as Los Angeles County, they gathered up many of the Indians, the Native Americans that lived here, and brought them to San Gabriel Valley to build a San Gabriel mission. My ancestors are buried in the San Gabriel mission, and most of the Tongva Gabrielino people have relatives that pass through the mission, and that is why we call ourselves Gabrielino. There's several different groups, and unfortunately, the Gabrielino were dispossessed of all of their land. All of the land was taken away by first the Spanish missions. Then when it became the Republic of Mexico, the land was parceled out to aristocrats and taken over. And then when the Americans invaded in 1848 and California became a state, and then they discovered gold, there was a policy of extermination, which was supported by the state legislature and paid for, helped by the federal government. And the idea was to remove the Indians from this beautiful land so that the settler colonialist people could get the gold and the resources. So sadly, the Tongva, Gabrielino Tongva people lost all their land. We do not have a base. We do not have a land base. Unlike some of the other California tribes, like the Chumash, were able to preserve some of their land, and they have federal recognition, which gives them many benefits. The Gabrielino are not federally recognized. However, we are state recognized by the state of California only recently. So many of the people in our community are pressing for federal recognition. That's the background. This particular site that we're talking about today, though, Kuruvungna, is located right in the heart of West Los Angeles, surrounded by a city. What happened to the Tongva people is, I suppose you could say they became urban Indians, engulfed and by the civilization that we now live in, which is in Los Angeles, as many of you maybe have visited, is tall buildings, skyscrapers, a lot of concrete, asphalt, and mini malls and apartment buildings. But here on this small piece of land that is actually belongs to the Los Angeles Unified School District. They purchased the land 120 years ago. And on this land was the site of Kuruvungna, which is centered on two natural springs that still flow to this very day. The waters rise from the mountains behind us, the Santa Monica Range, that allows the aquifer to be replenished, and it bubbles up on the grounds of the springs. It produces, one of the springs that we're protecting produces 56,000 gallons of fresh water every day. It's potable, it's drinkable. And up until recently, it all flowed essentially into the storm drain and out to the ocean. For 30 years, this foundation, which was created in 1992 by a group of University High alumni, students, tribal members, members of the community, helped along with people like Tom Hayden, who was a state senator at the time, and Angie Burns, who is Tongva and was a very important player in getting the recognition and getting the springs protected, and particularly getting a lease agreement with the school district. So we now have 2 acres that are fenced off, It is still owned by the school district. However, we have a sort of limited sovereignty over the site. The site has been degraded for the last 100 years by the school itself. They built classrooms, they had tennis courts, they had bungalows on the site. The school once had a population of over 3,000 students. Over the years, the student population has diminished. It's now 1,500 students. We are pushing to reclaim some of the other adjacent pieces of land that are rather unused by the school. In the meantime, we have dedicated our efforts to restoring the site by eradicating invasive plants, by removing a lot of the intrusive infrastructure that was placed by the school, reintroducing our wonderful variety of native plants that used to grow throughout the LA basin. We are also reintroducing native creatures into a habitat that is being protected now. For the last several years, we've been engaged in this restoration of the grounds. We do have a small museum which displays some of the cultural artifacts. And the mission of the foundation, the Gabrielino Tongva Springs Foundation, is to preserve and to protect and to restore and revitalize the Kuduvungnu village and to provide educational opportunities for the people that live in the area who are very ignorant of the people that used to live here. Unfortunately, I think because of the history of Southern California and Los Angeles, there's not a lot of discussion. This is not taught in the schools, what happened to the local native people. Things have changed now. It's a different age, and I think people are more interested and aware. So we want to provide an opportunity for everybody to come and visit the springs and learn about the Tongva and our efforts to be federally recognized and to someday take some of the land, get some of the land back. Unfortunately, Beverly Hills, Long Beach, Santa Monica, city of Los Angeles, these are the most valuable pieces of real estate perhaps on the planet. And as much as it is the most gracious and beautiful place to live, it was very, very difficult for the local Gabrielino to hang on to any of this land. But we're still here. Our descendants are here. My children are involved. And that is really what we're trying to promote, is to maintain the culture and the values of the native people that once lived in Los Angeles. There might be some more pictures here. I see a few pictures posted, but I don't know if Abby can toggle through some of the other photographs. And if not, that's fine. There's a sign that I can see. It's a highway sign that acknowledges the Tongva Sacred Springs. And you can see a sign that is the proper spelling of Kuduvungna. There are a few Tongva place names that are still used in Los Angeles, such as Topanga and Cahuenga and Tohonga and Cucamonga. So there are remnants, but it's very much been a challenging time to maintain this thread of culture to our ancestors. So this piece of land, this 2-acre protected piece of land, is really the last acknowledged place of sacred Tongva land. And we have alliances now with the entire community, and we're getting ready to renegotiate our lease with the city or with the school board to take back some of this land in the name of the foundation, and perhaps ultimately as a conservancy to protect it in perpetuity. So I don't see any other pictures here, but if we could get some of the photos that I sent out, it would be helpful just to give you a demonstration of our efforts. But if not, that's fine. I can tell you more about the introduction of the native Arroyo chub, which are the minnows that used to live in this area. We were able to introduce them only after we eradicated the invasive non-native crayfish that somebody brought in and placed in the ponds that are fed by the springs, which was an ecological disaster because they They will eat all the eggs of our native frogs and tadpoles and fish. So they have been eradicated. It took a year to dry everything out and to rework the area. We have been able to remove a lot of the invasive plant. We're planting with natives now. And I think one of the greatest things we were able to do was to use the excess water. As you know, Southern California is in a drought, and most of the water is imported. So we have established a small pump that is run with solar panels. So we're able to produce, to use some of the spring water to spread it throughout the site to irrigate our new native plants. It's a very exciting time, and we've involved the local students. We have a lot of involvement with the UCLA people and the professors and students from the university and other community groups who want to come and learn. So if there's any other pictures, I don't see anything else here, but I don't know if there's questions that I can take or if hello.
Hey, thanks, Bob. It looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the PowerPoint, but I do thank you so much. And I don't see any questions at this time, but I think someone will be typing something in, and we'll make sure we get to the questions after everyone presents. But I did want to make a point, and I apologize for not doing it sooner, but we did want to acknowledge that our TLPI main office, which is located in West Hollywood, in the city of West Hollywood, is on Tongva land. And we are so grateful that you could join us today, because we felt it was very important to acknowledge the people of the land of where our office is on, and to acknowledge the indigenous people that are from there and whose land it is. So thank you so much for presenting. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was a great honor to be here. And I invite everybody when they come to Los Angeles. I know this is going out through the country, but please come and visit us. You'll have a warm welcome, just like the Spanish were welcome. Had we known, I don't know if it would have been any different, but please come and visit, and thank you. I appreciate it. I may have to leave the webinar early, unfortunately, but I'll hang out as long as I can.
Okay, great. Thank you, Bob.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Thanks. And with that, I apologize again for the technical difficulties. It looks like we're trying to get the PowerPoint back up, but next we would like to turn, I believe next we are going to I'm so sorry. I'd like to turn it over to Deb Parker and let her introduce herself and the National Native American Boarding School Foundation. So I'm going to turn it over.
Hey, Chia, Sitsayaltsa, Sitsta, Twal, Chaf, Duflelap, Halslehel. Good afternoon, dear relatives. My traditional name is Sitsayaltsa. I'm here on the homelands of the Duflelap people, known as the Tulalip tribes. And it is an honor to join you. And we'd like to thank the Tribal Law and Policy Institute for this day today, and in deep gratitude of the acknowledgement of the work of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy. Our CEO couldn't join us today, so she sent me in her place. So I hope I do some justice. I'd also like to congratulate the other honorees and just know that you picked an amazing group of folks. Joanne Horns I'm such a fan of Joanne, and I'm sorry she was cut off, but I just want to send her my love. She is a true inspiration of someone who's traveled maybe for 2 days sometimes to attend our meetings as we help support women and children through NIWRC. So I just wanted to acknowledge her and her program and the amount of love, culture, and compassion that she puts into that work as well. I'd also like to highlight some of our incredible work at the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, and we refer to the coalition as NABS. So I'll kind of share some highlights of who we are and some of the work that we do. the coalition was formed in 2012, and in part to advocate for the establishment of a federal commission on U.S. Indian boarding schools, similar to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Canada's residential schools. And for years, NABS has been a part of a grassroots movement of Native academics, researchers, tribal leaders, and boarding school survivors and descendants who are seeking truth, justice, and healing. The work that we have in front of us is tremendous, as many of you know, with the discovery of the children in unmarked graves at Kamloops has really created this awakening, and the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, we are here to help lead in the United States our efforts to bring justice, to bring healing, and to bring light to what has occurred during this time. There's been some humble beginnings with our team, and so I want to kind of introduce who our team is. We have a team of about 10 of us, and our Christine McCleave, she's our CEO. She's from Turtle Mountain, Chippewa. Turtle Mountain, Ojibwe. And she has been holding our program together for many years. So we're grateful for her to help lead our efforts. We have Stephen Curley, who's Dene Navajo Nation. He's our Director of Digital Archives. We have Dr. Samuel B. Torres. He's Mexica and Nawa. He's our Director of Research and Program. We have Jennifer Blevins, who's our operations manager. We have Laura Horgan, who I believe is joining us here today. She's Pawnee and Choctaw. She's our communications officer. And we have Iku Beck, who is Blackfeet, and Red River Métis, who's our community outreach coordinator. And we are continuing to hire, and we are continuing to grow as we support this work. We also have an amazing board from all over the country who help support this work and are very committed to ensuring that our survivors have a voice, and that our families can learn the truth and can learn how we can heal together as a community, both within our tribal communities and within the United States. And in fact, some of our work, our advocacy, has been presented at the UN, working to bring, we filed at the UN on missing children. So we're looking to bring justice, not only here in the United States, but nationally and internationally. An area that I wanted to bring up, which is very important to us, is that we just introduced on September 30th, Elizabeth Warren introduced a bill, and the bill is to establish a Truth and Healing Commission on Indian boarding school policies in the U.S. So we will really be looking to each and every one of you to help join us, to help move this bill so that we can receive the support and the investigative research that we need to help us understand what has happened what happened in Indian boarding schools in the United States. And as you know, over the course of a century, hundreds of thousands of children were taken or coerced away from our families and tribes and forced to attend government-sanctioned Indian boarding schools. These schools were tools of assimilation and cultural genocide, resulting in the loss of language and culture and the permanent separation of children from their families. And to date, there has never been an accounting of the number of children forced to attend these schools, the number of children who were abused, died, or went missing while attending these schools, and the long-term impacts on the children and the families of children who are forced to attend Indian boarding schools. And as you know, we have limited amount of time to hear directly from survivors and record their stories. So a congressional commission is needed to locate and analyze the records from the over 367 known Indian boarding schools that operated in the US. A commission would also bring together boarding school survivors with a broad cross section of tribal representatives and experts in education, health, and children and families to fully express and understand the impacts of this federal policy of Indian child removal. So your support is absolutely needed, and we are so happy that there are programs across the country that help address justice, that help us seek the truth. And we know that we have colleagues at universities and tribal leaders across the country who are just now opening this painful past. And so the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition is here to help with that truth, to help with some of that healing, and to also work with partners, because we know we're a small group. So we are growing, we are building, and we want to be a part of that grassroots movement of the Native academics, the researchers, the tribal leaders, and most importantly in this discussion is the boarding school survivors and descendants who are seeking that truth, the justice, and the healing. This work to introduce a congressional commission has been underway for almost a decade. So it's my honor to be a part of this work right now. And as many of you have heard, the announcement by U.S. Secretary Deborah Haaland of the Department of Interior's Federal Indian Boarding School Truth Initiative in June this year, she took an important step along with the Interior to take accountability for revealing the truth. But we believe at NABS that a congressional commission is the most comprehensive approach to developing a complete picture of the ongoing impacts that the Indian boarding schools have had. And as we've heard a little bit about Alaska Native, we are really looking at what occurred in Alaska, what has occurred in Hawaii with Native Hawaiians when they were forced into the boarding schools, anywhere from the ages of 3 to 5 years old. So if you can imagine a 3-year-old, whether it's your grandchild or your child, imagine them at 3 years old being taken from your home. So as we begin to uncover, as we begin to look at what has happened to our families, we also ask for us to be very, very, as we're telling this truth, we also ask for the most compassionate way of addressing the boarding school. We ask for our relatives to support each other and to look into our relatives to make sure they're safe, and especially during this time of COVID, make sure they're taken care of, and just be a good listener for our relatives who survived boarding schools, and even ourselves. So we know that looking within ourselves, there's stories that are starting to come out, and relatives are starting to be identified, these children who were taken. And so we will continue to look for the children. We will continue to, our researchers, Dr. Sam and Stephen, are working daily to make sure that we have research up to date and we can help support families find this truth. So I just want to again thank you, and I know my time is short, but please join us, become a member of the coalition. Please register for our conference on November 2nd, our annual virtual conference. Sorry, not November 2nd, November 19th through the 20th. Please register now. It's free. There's no cost. If you can donate, that would be helpful. But become a member of our coalition, and we'll work on finding this healing together. So, Digwitsi, thank you for this time.
Digwitsi, Gunishchi, Wopiditonka, Deb, and to the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. I honor the work that you're doing. I think that, for us living on this land, and many of our kind of colonial responses to understanding our history has not been forthcoming, and the truth has not been told. So this is for healing all of our relatives, for giving voices to those thousands of graves on stolen land, and understanding that their time, their love, our love, and remembrance of them is bringing forth the truth and healing and justice that they deserve. And for many of us who understand even second generation, that healing as well. My mother was in boarding schools, and understanding that we have the opportunity today to change that for our children. So thank you so much, Miigwech, Kadamia. So we just want to remind folks that if you have questions on the lower bottom of your screen under Q&A, please post your questions there. You can also, you notice that chat is also available, but questions get lost in there. So if you could just post them in the Q&A, and we will address them at the conclusion of all of our organizations introducing themselves. We just want to give them the time that they, to share with us the work that they're doing across Indian country. So I would like to introduce our next organization, the Pine Ridge Girls School, or Pojoaque. And part of our understanding of our way of life and how we follow this way of life is understanding that we follow the stars, we follow the buffalo. And I have had the honor of going to the Pine Ridge Girls School in Porcupine, South Dakota, and working with our powerful teachers, aunties, tuis, kushis, unshis, that do incredible work and work with our young women. And so part of the goal is providing the strategic educational model for college prep. But I also know just from my own experience that it is also a ceremonial and following our ceremonial way of life, our Lakota Wichoha, which is our way of life. So we have two amazing folks joining us today, including the founder of the Pine Ridge Girls School, and that is Victoria Shore. We also have Maria Halpern from the Pine Ridge Girls School. So I will turn it over to both of you to introduce yourself and talk more about the incredible work that you're able to do in Porcupine.
Hello. Are we speaking now?
Yes. So I introduced the organization. So Victoria or Maria Halpern, we are turning it over to you to talk more about the work that you're able to do, the history of the Pine Ridge Girls School, and anything that you would like to share with us about the amazing work that you're able to do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I am Victoria Shore. I am an outsider who has been uplifted and honored to be working in Lakota country. I'm speaking from Chumash land in California right now. I am the co-founder of the Archer School for Girls in Los Angeles, which is where the idea really came from. The Archer School for Girls is a girls' school, college prep girls' school that's now 25 years old. We started with 30 girls. We're now at 500. And you walk in and it's a girl empowerment zone. One day about, I don't know, 15, 20 years after co-founding Archer, I started to wonder why this kind of education, this empowering education, couldn't be available to girls, other girls across the country. It hit me to start on the Pine Ridge. I went to Pine Ridge to visit. The first person that I met was Ethleen, Ironclad Two Dogs, and she said to me, "Yes, I will join you, but no, it can't be just a girls' school. It has to be a Lakota girls' school." And we talked about it, we thought about it. The vision really came from Etheline of how we would, what kind of school it would be, which is what was described earlier. At Archer, we say that the girls come to empowerment through their education. Here we realized we could turn it on its head and go to, we would start with empowerment and that would lead to education. And we're just starting to see that start to happen. It takes a long time to found a school. I know with Archer, things didn't start feeling really great until about 10 years in. We are 6 years in, and we're just really starting to find our footing, just starting to get our curriculum going in place. What we hope to have is a replicable model, a curriculum that we can share throughout Indian country, a school that can be adapted to really any Native community. And we're very excited about that. We're thrilled with the way things are going, and we're extremely honored to be here today. Now I'd like to turn over the program to Maria Halpern, who has been part of the school since the very beginning. Maria?
Thank you. Ampetu washte mitakipi donaya hipiki iuha chante washte anape chiuzapiksto. Good afternoon, everybody. To everyone gathered here, I shake your hand. My name is Maria Halpern. My Lakota name is Wachihi Otami. And like Victoria said, I've been working at the school for 6 years now. I have 5 daughters of my own, and 3 of them have been and are a part of the school. And I've learned so much through my time here at the girls' school. And it's exciting and to be here today. And it's really been an honor to serve the young Lakota women across the Pine Ridge Reservation. When I first started, I think we had, I think it was maybe 10 or 12 girls. And last year we had 30 girls. And, you know, every year we're growing, and we're just trying to get the word out there about our school. And this year we'll be having our first graduating class. So some of these seniors have been here since 7th grade, and it's really exciting to see. And I want to thank the Tribal Law and Policy Institute for inviting us here to talk to you all about our school. It's really a beautiful place, and it's the only Lakota girls' school in the country. So that's really exciting, and it's really unique. And I'm thankful, and I'm honored to be working with the girls. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you, Victoria. Appreciate the information that you bring to us about the Pine Ridge Girls School. Really important work. With that, I'd like to move on to the next organization. So we are actually going to hear from the Pojoaque Healing to Wellness Court from the Pueblo Pojoaque. And I'd like to welcome the Honorable Kim McGinnis and Adrian Sloan, who both work with the Pojoaque Healing to Wellness Court. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And we're so honored, the whole team here at the Pueblo Pojoaque Healing to Wellness Court, we call it our Path to Wellness Court, is so honored to be part of the 25th anniversary celebration of the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. And congratulations on you all for your 25 years of service. The Path to Wellness started back in 2014 is when we first started having trainings. And the Tribal Law and Policy Institute has really worked hand in hand with us this whole time. And as we continue to improve and try things and fail, you know, it's fail again, try again, fail better. And that's what we're continuing to do. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to Chris Pacheco and to Precious Benali, who have both been key helpers with us, along with former TLPI staff member Lauren Van Shelfgaard, who had, they have really helped us develop our policies and procedures, helped us, connect with other folks, been key in helping us connect with other tribal healing to wellness courts so that we could continue to improve. And I'm, so grateful to you all. So, and we're so honored to be here. We started with an adult criminal healing to wellness court. We got funding through the Bureau of Justice Assistance for their adult drug court program to start Pojoaque's Healing to Wellness Court back in 2015. And so we're still a very young wellness court. We're still learning a lot. But even so, over the past 6 years, things that we were taught to do in 2015 are things that we're now told not to do in 2021. So it's really moving. And, I have Adrian here who will talk a little bit about how we've been focusing on trauma and focusing on pro-social activities for folks struggling with substance use disorders and focusing on connection. And that's been so challenging during this time of COVID because what we've learned through my few years of 6 years of being the presiding judge over the wellness court is that, sanctions are easy, so the wellness court model is we bring folks in who either are involved through social services or involved through criminal justice, as repeat offenders. So people who are at high risk of reoffending and also who have high needs for substance use disorder treatment. So we bring them into this court where they are highly supervised, given a lot of structure, we call it, their scaffolding. We give them scaffolding to support them as they move on this journey of healing their brains, healing from trauma, working towards being able to live a life free of substance misuse. And of course, it's a challenge the whole way through. But, we've seen tremendous successes and we've also had tremendous disappointments. So, we have learned that creating connection with the folks, creating community with our folks in our Healing to Wellness Court, creating fun for them is so important. And that's one of the key things that we have been trying to focus on. And even during this time of COVID, of creating connections for folks. So we have adult healing to wellness court. We also have a juvenile healing to wellness court, and we have a young adult wellness court. So one of the other things we've learned is that folks who are coming in who are 18 to 22, 23, 24, that their brains are different, their issues are different, and they're really not necessarily appropriate to be in the regular adult healing to wellness court. So we've created a separate track for those folks so we can give them different services, have different focuses than we do with the folks in our adult healing to wellness court. And, one of the things we've done is through some creative funding is we were able to rent apartments. So we have sober living apartments. So we have a male sober living apartment and a female sober living apartment to provide a safe space for people to land when they're coming out of jail, when they're coming out of residential treatment programs. If they don't have a good, sober, stable place to stay when they get out of these places, it's just going to be, setting themselves up for failure if they just go right back into their community, right back into their people, places, and things where they were before when they were still in the heat of their misusing substances. So with COVID, there's been a huge increase in overdoses, a huge increase in misusing substances, and it also a less opportunity for us to be out in the community, to be educated in the community and to get folks into our treatment programs. With staff, with the team, we've struggled a lot, and there's a lot of secondary trauma among the team. And so as a team members, we also need to be aware of taking care of ourselves. And that's partly where Adrienne comes in and her team comes in, taking care of the staff and also taking care of our folks and helping us focus on trauma. So Adrienne, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about your role as one of our many team members.
Thank you, Judge. Hello, everyone. My name is Adrienne Sloan. I'm a licensed mental health therapist, and I live on Tewa land and work on Tewa land here in northern New Mexico for the Pueblo of Pojoaque. And I do a few different things within the programming. I I see clients, the participants that are in the Healing to Wellness court, and I'm also working under a SAMHSA grant to expand services, which has been really exciting, just to think about the possibilities of like how we can enhance the individual needs of the folks that are coming into the court. One of those, as Judge mentioned, is just how do we become more and more trauma aware and trauma informed in the work that we do, and what that looks like really putting that into practice, especially among the team of us. One of the things that we've done in this last year with this, under this particular expansion grant, is to bring in a certified peer support worker. And that's been really amazing with the clients, because they have somebody that's, you know, a peer that's not, if someone doesn't feel comfortable coming to a therapist, not everybody wants to see a therapist. There's a lot of stigma still with mental health. So having someone that's a peer that can just relate to them through their own experience has been really profound. And also just having that person on this team to, you know, provide just anything really, like he'll take people places, transport them, pick up medications, take them to appointments, and then offering these pro-social activities, which has been a challenge through COVID of gathering. So getting really creative with that, and then partnering with some other organizations, one of which is the in Nambe, Pueblo, there is a wonderful organization that's doing a lot of therapeutic adventure education. And so they offer some programming that we could partner with to take people out hiking, and really wrapping in just some cultural activities. We've also brought on a cultural specialist. So he works for the behavioral health program part-time, and also with the Poe Museum in Pojoaque. So on Fridays, we've been with this certified peer support worker, having him bring in like traditional beadwork and weaving. He's also a Tewa language teacher. So just really wanting to provide more emphasis that's like oriented to culture. I think, yeah, just the mental health piece has been huge, you know, just obviously as someone who's a therapist, just really seeing the impact and necessity to have that in the offerings through the court, and whether that's providing services to people through myself and other therapists that are on our team, or outsourcing it to other organizations, but just really trying to meet the needs of, you know, each person, making it more individualized towards like what they need to support them has been really big. And what else did I want to say? We also received some additional funding just for Pojoaque through the behavioral health department for just COVID direct services. So in that, we're hoping to streamline some of these programs, not just for the community, but also for the participants of the court, which is working with a couple of folks that we just reached out to, just trying to find some resources to bring outside folks in to do some trainings. And one of which we're in the process of getting going, I'm really excited about, which is working with Del Laverdew, which I'm not sure many of you might know. He is from Crow Nation, and he has a background in internal family systems therapy, as well as somatic experiencing. And so we've partnered with him and a woman named Ami Lee, who's from Somatic Experiencing Institute, to kind of create a pilot program that he's calling an Indigenous informed IFS in somatic experiencing. So we're hoping to bring that in next year. We know it'd be ideal to have it more in person, but that's been a challenge for COVID. So, and we're also working with an amazing organization, Allison Kelly and Associates, and they are helping with just us making sure the deliverables on our grant are being well executed, and they're going to partner with us to create a visual logic model so that we have cohesive programming, you know, with the court programs and other community programs there in Pojoaque. So that's very exciting. And I think that's all.
Great. Thank you so much, Adrian and Judge McGinnis. We appreciate you joining us today. Next slide, please. I just want to thank everyone from all the organizations that have joined us today for joining the webinar and speaking about your organization and sharing all the good work that you do. We're really happy that everyone on the webinar is here to join us celebrating our 25th anniversary. And as many of our Native cultures, when we celebrate, we like to have a giveaway or to honor others who have helped us to get to where we are. And as part of that giveaway, we're asking those who can, in honor of the TLPI 25th anniversary, we invite you to consider giving to one or more of these amazing organizations to support them and all the good work that they do. And it looks, I apologize, it looks like we're having technical difficulties again with our PowerPoint. Sorry, everyone. I believe it is time for question and answer. So if any of you have questions for anyone at any of the organizations, if you could type it into the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. Let me take a look here.
So as you're taking a look, Chia, I think it's just a moment to acknowledge each of our amazing honorees. I know that in Yupik speaking, you know, providing shelter for our organizations, all the way to providing sober living for our relatives with Pojoaque. I just think that it's an amazing opportunity for all of these organizations. I know that the National Native American Boarding School Coalition has their registration link in the chat box. So their registration for their conference, November 19th through the 21st. I wanted to also invite folks, hopefully to visit each of these websites, but also to support the amazing work that they're doing. I know the Pine Ridge Girls School, Ampo Wichakpi, does opportunities for girls year round. So it's not just during the school year. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And also, I think, Chia, we had a question in the chat box, or the Q&A box, sorry, rather. And it was speaking to understanding the future for our young people. I don't know if we want to ask that question or move into our questions on that we've prepared for our panelists. I can't hear you, Chia.
Sorry, just saw that. It looks like the question was answered within the chat box. Let's see, Lana, do you want to just go ahead with the question you have prepared at this point?
Absolutely. So this is for each of our organizations, and we would like, hopefully, for each one of you to have the opportunity to share with us. But the first question, and I always love to focus on, what are the organizational successes that you are most proud of? And so if one of our organizations would like to respond, or we can call on folks, either way, but what are some of the organizational successes that you are most proud of? And I'm going to call on Deb from the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay, perfect. Wow, okay, that's a great question because we focusing, let's see, let me start my video here. There we are. Okay, focusing on our strength. I think the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition has done an excellent job of bringing the issue of boarding schools to the forefront and working nationally to help others identify one, where are the list of Indian boarding schools in the United States. That's been a tremendous amount of work, just locating boarding schools, and then helping to understand the impact of the historical trauma. The NABS has also done some in Tulalip in 2019, had their boarding school healing conference. And so we brought together educators and survivors, leaders, academia, brought them together to have the discussion of where are we today and how has the boarding schools impacted us. And so we've had some excellent dialogue, research brought out to help us with our truth and healing. We've been working on truth and healing curriculum and providing resources. We've also worked with Carlisle on repatriation, and we're working, as I mentioned earlier, the UN filing on missing children. We also are working to bring forward resolutions and petitions to show our support for the bill that we've been working on in the Senate and the House. And we also are working with the Interior to bring forward all of the research and information necessary for us to tell the truth and to bring curriculum and information to the society. So, and ultimately the healing. So we're really in that place of finding healing with each other and even identifying that healing within the generations. And so that's where we're at right now. We're always excited. We're building our coalition, and it's finally really being talked about. And I think as we bring this information out, it will help shed some light onto some of that historical trauma that we've suffered for generations. And once that light is brought out, then I believe that we can heal not only within our Indigenous communities, but beyond as well. This country needs a blessing, a big healing with a bold amount of truth and a whole lot of love and compassion for one another. So that's what the NABS, the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition, is really working on, is that healing piece.
Thank you for sharing those successes. And I think, it is amazing that it has taken this long for us to finally tell the truth, but with the voices of the young children that you represent, whether it's congressional hearings, the UN, all the way to the Interior, or the voices of our grandmothers and aunties and uncles and those who have survived. We thank you for that amazing work. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Do we have someone from Pojoaque, Pojoaque, from the Pine Ridge Girls School? Would you like to share any successes with us that you are most proud of? Do we have Maria? There you are.
Hi, yeah, I can go. I know for me, one of our for us here, seeing our students culturally grounded, and I guess just figuring out like who they are and where they come from. I think that's really powerful for them, and seeing them thrive. I know, Lana, when you talked about in your intro about our school being following the star map and doing ceremonies, that's really helped our students heal from their own traumas and trauma that has been passed down to them. So it's really good to see them thrive. A lot of them can pray in our Lakota language. They know their medicinal plants. We have one student during this pandemic who one of her relatives got really sick, and she remembered a teaching that she got in her grandfather's class, and he talked about the plants that you get to help your relatives when they're sick. So she went out and hiked and went down to the creek area, and she found the medicine, and she helped her relative get better. So I think that was really beautiful, and they really implement these teachings and our way of life in their everyday lives, and that's just beautiful to see. And over the past 6 years, I've seen a lot of students really grow and flourish, and I'm super excited to see our first graduating class, you know, seeing how they thrive in college and taking these teachings and this knowledge with them, and it makes them really strong. So I'm really glad to see that. So I don't know, Victoria, if you want to chime in and add any more.
Can you hear me? Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to say that people are saying that that they recognize our girls all over the reservation. You know, they really speak Lakota, and they stand out with their behavior and their manners, and that makes us really proud. So it almost seems like a miracle, because you know, you start with one of these visions that you have and you think, can this really work? And then suddenly you hear something like that from people and you think, oh my goodness, you know, it really is happening. You know, there's change. The small little change is starting to really spiral out, you know, through the reservation. And we're very, very excited about that and the potential. Thank you.
Wopita Tonka, I think that, you know, you shared about the young women, and that's what I have come to experience, is seeing these women not just speak their language, but sing the songs beautifully, powerfully. And that is part of our prayers too, is being able to sing, and they're amazing, amazing. So thank you for that, Nina Wopita. Do we have, I think we have time for our folks from Pojoaque, Tribal Healing to Wellness Court.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, so I think the thing we're most proud of, and organizationally, and also what we've seen in the community, is I became a judge in Pojoaque in 2013, and at that time there wasn't a lot of support for folks who are struggling through trauma or struggling through substance use disorders. So for me, it's really seeing the community embrace our programs. You know, before we launched our Healing to Wellness Court, we did tons of community meetings. We met with tribal leaders. We met with tribal council. We did a lot of education, a lot of bringing in trauma experts, a lot of bringing in substance use disorder experts to talk to the community, about medicine for addiction treatment, to talk to the community about changes to the brain in folks struggling with substance use disorder. And so to be able to see just the cultural change of accepting, of changing it from being substance use, misuse being basically a matter of willpower, that if you had a sufficient willpower, you could overcome your substance misuse, to understanding that it is a chronic relapsing brain disease. And of course, not everyone in the community embraces that, but for the most part, it's been a huge sea change. And so people come to the court now not expecting to be punished, but expecting to get help for their issues and expecting to get help for their family members. If somebody's arrested, you know, they're not looking to send somebody to prison for a year. They're looking to figure out what programs we can get that person into to get them help. And so that's what I'm most proud of, what I've seen over the time that I've been in Pojoaque. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge McGinnis. Could we advance to the next slide, please? It looks like we're coming to the end of our webinar, and I would just like to make an announcement. Well, first, I want to thank all of the panelists, all the presenters from all these great organizations. We thank you so much for joining and taking time out of your day to speak with us and share with us your organization and what you've been doing, all the good work you've been doing, and we're just so very grateful that you're here and doing what you do for our tribal communities. We are recording this webinar and it will be available online on home.tlpi.org. And as I mentioned before, we do have our last webinar from last week that is up there to view. Next week, if we invite you all to join us for Building a Vision for the Future. And joining us will be Judge Abby Abenanti, Chief Judge of the Yurok Tribe, as well as Sarah Deer, University Distinguished Professor with the Women, Gender, and Sexuality Studies at the School of Public Affairs and Administration at the University of Kansas, Pat Sikakeptawa, affiliated with the University of Fairbanks, and Lauren Van Schilfgaard, the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians Director of the Tribal Legal Development Clinic, UCLA School of Law. And I believe Antonia did drop in the registration link. So if you could, if you need to register, go ahead and register there. Next slide, please. We wanted to thank our 25th anniversary committee. Everybody listed here has done so much great work. Heather and Jessica and Bonnie, who we dearly miss today. Heather Valdez Freeman. We have two Heathers, Maria, Christina, Ashley, Tasha, Cindy, and Marlon, who have all done so much work behind the scenes to get our 25th anniversary celebration off the ground and running. And thank you all so much. And our next slide is just a thank you to our board of directors who provided a great deal of direction and suggestions and has been very helpful along the way, helping us with not only the organization, but our 25th anniversary. So thank you all very much. And thank you all for joining today. And with that, we're done. And again, please join us next week for our last celebration webinar. Thank you all and have a great day.